Kurt Daudt is the Speaker of the Minnesota House for the 2015-2016 biennium. The 41-year-old representative from Crown will be serving his third term. Daudt has a background in business, has served on various local governance boards, and is a co-founder of a nonprofit organization that builds orphanages in Kenya. In his free time, he enjoys hunting and spending time with his family. The Speaker sat down with us before session to speak about his priorities. Speaker-designate Daudt, thank you very much for joining us here today.
No problem. I'm happy to join you.
Can you describe the type of leader you hope to be, and what will your priorities be this session?
Well, that's a good question. I've thought an awful lot about that myself. You know, the type of leader that I hope to be, I think when you take over as Speaker, or, you know, I will be taking over as Speaker, you think a lot more about the institution and making sure that this place functions well. And, you know, one of the things that I said to the freshman class that I spoke to the week of the election, and it was a bipartisan group, I said to them that I wanted to make sure that they had access to the issue areas that they really were passionate about, and they got to work on the issues and committees and legislation that they were passionate about. And I think if we do that, if everybody works on issues they care about and are passionate about, they're going to be better legislators. And I think ultimately that will make this institution, the House of Representatives, a better place and run better and really serve the public better. And I think that's the ultimate goal. So I hope that, you know, I hope that 10 years from now, when I'm gone and nobody remembers who I am, the legacy that I've left here is that people maybe think differently about how we approach problems. And I've really talked an awful lot to everybody about refocusing on the actual problems that Minnesotans care about instead of putting the solutions before the problems. And I think that's one of the biggest frustrations I have with the way that the House of Representatives operates. We get 201 legislators that show up on the first day of session and they introduce their solutions in bill format, and then they spend the next 5 months convincing you that their solution is the answer to your problem, when nobody really organically sits around a table and analyzes the problem from every angle and looks at every possible solution and then picks the one or a combination of solutions that really does the best job of solving the problem and serving Minnesotans at the same time. So I hope that I can get legislators here in the House to just think a little bit differently and refocus on the problems and the problems that Minnesotans care about.
Some consider the Speaker of the House to be the second most powerful position in state government in Minnesota after the governor. What does this new responsibility mean to you?
Well, you know, it is, and I've heard people say that. I actually don't think of myself any differently, or you know, I know that the position brings a great deal of responsibility, but to me, I look at it in the perspective that it brings a great deal of opportunity. An opportunity for me to maybe, as I said, change the way that we think about the problems and how we relate to the public here at the Capitol, but also an opportunity for me to you know, impact people's lives in the way that I see, you know, best. But really, you know, it isn't all about what I want to do. It's about making sure that folks here have the access and ability to work on the issues they care about. A good leader doesn't have every answer. A good leader draws the best ideas out of everybody who's involved, puts those on the table, and facilitates a process that we really put the, you know, implement or pass into law the best ideas. And that's really what I look to do.
With Speaker Thiessen being elected by the DFL caucus as minority leader, and you two essentially switching roles, in what ways will your relationship change?
It's interesting. I don't know. I haven't really seen that it has changed all that much. I think we have a pretty good relationship. I think we understand that we don't always agree on everything, obviously, but we do respect each other, and I think we know that we can trust each other. Neither one of us has done anything to, you know, kind of betray that trust with the other. And I think we both have an appreciation for the institution and understanding that, yes, while we may disagree on issues, our roles is to make sure that this institution functions in a way that we can have that public debate, and while we may disagree, ultimately we're going to pass legislation that's going to get signed into law, hopefully, and that will be, you know, our ability for this body to kind of represent its constitutional duty in the way state government works. So it is interesting, I think, the fact that he has been Speaker. I don't think we've had a Speaker go to Minority Leader for quite some time. I don't know when the most recent time that happened was, but it is a little bit interesting. He has more experience in my current job, than I do. He also has been Minority Leader before, so he's revisiting that role, and it's something that I think is familiar to him. So, obviously, it'll be interesting to see how the session unfolds and how we interact and get along with each other. But we have a good relationship, and I expect that will continue.
What are your caucus's top priorities for the 2015 legislative session?
Well, I think we want to kind of refocus on making sure that we're solving the problems that Minnesotans care about, and really doing our best job at representing all Minnesotans, not Minneapolis and St. Paul, not just the suburbs, not just Greater Minnesota, but all Minnesotans. And so we want to make sure that all of those perspectives are represented in the solutions and the ideas and the process to come up with those solutions. But the main issue areas I think that we want to focus on, number one, is Minnesota's economy. Since the recession, obviously Minnesota's economy has been recovering, but I think that recovery has slowed in recent years, and unfortunately Minnesotans haven't seen the wage growth and the wages come back. I think they're still making quite a bit less than they did before the recession. Data shows that. So we want to make sure that we're creating an environment where job creators can create more jobs and more better paying jobs that we know Minnesotans want and need. So that'll be one of our top priorities. We also want to tackle some problems that have been plaguing the state for a number of years. One of those being the achievement gap in K-12 education. Basically, minority and lower income students aren't getting the same education that white middle and higher income students are getting in many schools in Minnesota. We have the highest achievement gap, or second highest, depending on when you look at the data. We have the highest or the second highest achievement gap in the country. I think that's a disgrace, and I think that's a problem that we can solve in a bipartisan fashion. So we're going to roll up our sleeves and really make an effort to impact those kids' lives and really make sure that every Minnesota student gets the world-class education they deserve. Another problem is funding for nursing homes. Our senior citizens are absolutely a treasure in our society, and we need to show them the respect that they deserve. In an effort to show that priority, we have actually created, for the first time, a committee on aging and long-term care. So I really want to make sure that we're tackling that problem and coming up with a solution on a long-term basis, so that we do show our senior citizens, our veterans, and the most vulnerable in our society that they are important to us, and give them the respect that they deserve. So that's a big problem that we want to solve as well. Transportation funding, I think, is going to be a big issue in the upcoming session. Our caucus is really committed to making sure that we're prioritizing taking care of our road and bridge infrastructure. It's the main form of transportation for 95+% of Minnesotans. We want to make sure that we're taking care of that first before we're biting off more than we can chew in other forms of transportation. So we're going to make sure that we make that a priority as well. And then lastly, we want to also tackle the MNsure and the reforms that we think are necessary on MNsure, I should say. Democrats made some pretty big reforms to health care and in the last couple of years, and there have been some big problems with that. So we want to make sure that we're dealing with that and making sure that we're providing Minnesotans with health care coverage that they can afford, and basically that gives them access to the doctors and hospitals and clinics that they want. So we need to make sure that we're honoring their ability to afford the health coverage and also have the choice that we know they want. And who's providing that coverage to them. So if we focus on that, I think we can solve that problem in a bipartisan fashion as well.
Well, you brought up transportation, and what do you think is the best way to fund transportation projects, and would you support a gas tax?
I have been very honest about saying that everything's on the table, and while I think that a gas tax is not necessarily the magic solution, and I say that because, number one, Democrats just finished 2 years of complete control of state government. If it was the magic solution and it was that important, they would have done it. over the last 2 years. So it is incredibly unpopular with the public right now, and I'm not sure that it is the only solution. I've been very open in saying that everything's on the table, including a gas tax, even though it's not my preferred method of solving the problem. I'm going to encourage other people, just as I have been open in leaving it on the table, I'm going to encourage other people not to assume that that's the only solution to the problem. Let's keep open minds. Let's really analyze what's going on and how we can solve the problem. Let's look at every solution and figure out what the best one might be. Again, a good leader doesn't have the answer to every problem, but a good leader makes sure that we're drawing the best solutions and best ideas out of everybody else. So we're going to have a really good debate about transportation, the future of transportation funding in Minnesota. And I'm not sure exactly what the end solution looks like right now, but I hope that we can, certainly solve that problem and maintain and improve our transportation infrastructure in a way that serves the public the best that we can. So, and I think ultimately the solution should be a bipartisan solution as well. So we're going to look for ideas from both parties in solving this problem.
Are there any specific transportation projects that you would push to the top of the priority list?
You're not necessarily. I haven't dug in deep enough to say I want to make sure we do this one or that one. Not necessarily. I think, as I've said, just generally, I think we want to make sure that we're taking care of our road and bridge infrastructure. I think Minnesotans generally think that we have a pretty good transportation infrastructure in the state of Minnesota, but maybe we're not keeping up with it and maintaining it as well as we should. We're starting to see more potholes here and there, and that can be problematic if we let those things go on without tackling them. So I think we need to figure out what the maintenance will cost on the infrastructure we have right now, and then kind of what it looks like if we put more dollars infused into that system. And what that buys. I think we also need to look at efficiencies in MnDOT and how we administer those transportation dollars to figure out if, basically to ensure that we're spending every dollar as efficiently and as effectively as possible. And I think, frankly, we need to do that across all of state government, but I think maybe transportation can be the place that we really start with a refocus on making sure that we're spending every dollar as effectively as possible.
Are there any other issues flying under the radar that you are particularly concerned about?
I don't know. There's always seems to be a couple of issues that pop up every session that seem to catch the media's attention and catch the public's attention. I don't know what they'll be this session. One of them that I think has gotten a lot of attention in the last couple of years is this, whether or not we should allow Sunday liquor sales. And the public obviously has gotten more involved in advocating for that in recent years. So it always ends up being kind of an interesting debate, a spicy debate, maybe I'll call it, on the House floor. So it'll be interesting to see if that catches more steam this year. But I don't know what those issues will be. That may be one of them. It may not be. You never know. But I think transportation is going to probably play a big role this session. Obviously we have a budget surplus forecasted out of the November forecast. That gives us a glimpse, but we'll set the state's budget off of the February forecast. There are some concerning signs in the November forecast. On its face, I think $1 billion surplus sounds great. I think it makes our lives a lot easier and our jobs here at the legislature a lot easier. However, there are some concerning undertones in that. About 3/4 of the surplus comes from expenditures being lower than originally projected. And only about 1/4 of it comes from revenues exceeding expectations. They've actually downgraded the revenues in the next biennium in 16-17 by about $400 million in this forecast. So that's concerning. It's the first downgrade in future revenues in, I think it's 10 forecasts, or about 5 years. So I hope that doesn't mean that our economy is taking a negative turn or that it's trending downward. But it is concerning, and of course, when 3/4 of the surplus comes from not spending money, and only 1/4 of it comes from revenues being projected higher, and about half of it actually is coming from money that will be left over on the bottom line after this biennium. So only half of it comes from the next biennium. I think all of those things point to if we spend the surplus, and even if things almost flatline at where they are right now, or if they trend downward at all, we could be headed back towards a deficit. And I think all of us want to avoid that. So while I think the billion-dollar surplus makes our jobs easier, there are some concerning things under the surface that I think we all need to pay attention to.
So do you have any idea of what you'd like to see done with the surplus? Is it more of a wait and see situation?
I think right now, until February, I think we have to kind of wait and see if the downgrade in future revenues is a trend or if it's just a fluke. But ultimately, I think when I look at the tax policy over the last 4 years, and you obviously had Republicans in the House and Senate in the majority in 11 and 12, and then in 13, 14, Democrats in the majorities, and you saw two very different approaches at how to deal with a deficit. One was don't increase taxes and balance the budget without increasing taxes. What we saw when we did that was extreme economic growth in the state and a very steep recovery, a good recovery for the state. Fast forward to when the Democrats took over the majorities, and the deficit that they had to deal with was about 1/10 the size of the deficit that the Republicans dealt with 2 years earlier. And their response was, to about a $600 million deficit, raise $2.1 billion in taxes. Well, what we've seen now is that the economic recovery, has really almost flatlined, and we haven't seen the monthly surplus in revenues that we had seen in that previous biennium. So I think very basically, I think we need to take a look at where the state's revenue comes from, and it comes for the most part from two places. Income tax and sales tax. And to me what that says is that what we need for Minnesota's budget to be successful and for us to have more revenue, we need one simple thing. We need Minnesotans to make more money. And if Minnesotans make more money, they're going to pay more in income tax, they're going to have more money in their pockets, and they're going to pay more in sales tax when they buy goods and services. And the state will see more revenue. To me, the answer is very simple. And I think it helps everybody. It helps the state and it helps Minnesota families. Let's figure out how to get Minnesotans the better paying job opportunities that we know they want and need. And I think that will solve all of our problems.
What areas of bipartisan cooperation can be reached given Minnesota's newly divided government?
Well, I think we do have some opportunities. I think a couple of the areas that I talked about would be great opportunities for bipartisan cooperation. Number one, solving the achievement gap. This problem, for the most part, takes place in districts that are represented by Democrats. But it's still a problem that I care an awful lot about, because I really feel like we can't let any Minnesota child slip through the cracks without getting the best education that we can give them. Regardless of whether it's in a district that I represent or a Republican represents. We owe it to these kids to make sure that we're doing that. In other states, the education reform movement is very active and it's very bipartisan. In Minnesota, it really hasn't been. And I'm gonna reach out to some Democrats that I think are very passionate about education and specifically about this issue, and I'm going to challenge them to sit around a table and let's really see if we can figure out together what's causing this problem and see if we can come up with a solution. And I think that means that we're going to have to lock the doors and keep the special interests out, because I think there's some special interests in the state that are afraid that we're going to do things to upset the apple cart on teacher tenure or other things, and frankly, that might be what we need to do. That might be the ultimate solution. We need to make sure that we have the best teachers in the classroom. But I think if we focus on the problems and then work together towards the solution, I think that the process will be better. And I think Republicans and Democrats will work a lot better together in that scenario. So I'm going to challenge everybody to do that sort of thing. I also think the long-term care issue, the funding for nursing homes, is a big issue, and I think it affects districts that are represented by both Republicans and Democrats, and I really hope that we can work together to solve that as well.
Minnesotans have gotten to know quite a bit about you since you first took office in 2010. What is the greatest lesson you have learned about Minnesota?
You know, that's really interesting. Maybe I'll say about the institution of the House, or those that I've met and gotten to know while serving here in the legislature. There are really great people on both sides of the aisle that really care a lot about Minnesotans and really want to do what's right. And sometimes our process becomes political and it becomes ugly, and we disagree. But I think the people here are really good, and I think that's true about. I think the legislature is pretty representative, from at least from that respect, of all of Minnesotans. I think Minnesotans really are prideful people. They care a lot about Minnesota and making sure that we strive to improve, and we want to make sure that we're giving our kids the best education, and that we've got great paying jobs, and we're taking care of our environment, and all of those things. And I think that's really neat to see, and I think you know, it makes us in the legislature really strive to do a better job as well.
Thank you again, Speaker-designate Daudt, for letting us interview you.
Thank you.